Brought to you by Penguin.
Strangeland, written and read by me, Jon Sopel. Introduction. As a visual metaphor for the Britain I came back to at the beginning of 2022, after 8 years away, it was pretty perfect. Arguably the country's most famous landmark, which has graced a zillion postcards and features in any movie where scenes are filmed in London, was swaddled in plastic, held together by a complex lattice of scaffolding, with the clock at the top of the Elizabeth Tower unable to bong, unable to lure Dick Whittington back. Big Ben, the Palace of Westminster's iconic timepiece, which ensured Parliament knew when to start business and told us when debates would end and votes begin, was out of action, the Tower in danger of crumbling into the River Thames below. This was a Britain that, while I'd been away, had charted a new political and economic course for itself with the referendum to leave the European Union. At a time of rising economic protectionism, Britain voted to leave the biggest single market in the world, an act of self-harm that bewilders policymakers around the world, particularly in America, but which won the support of 52% of British voters after a bitterly fought campaign. Though the vote to leave the EU was 6 years earlier, 2022 would turn out to be the year when the political aftershocks of that decision would bring down the structures made unsteady by that June 2016 earthquake referendum, and it seemed to collapse in a pile of dusty masonry, twisted metal and broken glass. The sturdy political pillars of the UK would go through a rolling, rumbling, sometimes comedic convulsion. It would be the year of 3 prime ministers, 4 chancellors, a Home Secretary who lasted 6 days, 6 times longer than the Education Secretary, who was there for just 1. At the height of this absurd spectacle, another convulsion shook us to the core, when Queen Elizabeth II died, having served the nation with duty, dignity and discretion for 70 years. An audience with the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, one day, gone 48 hours later. With her death, it felt that some other cherished bits of what it means to be British had seemingly gone as well. It just all started to feel a bit unrecognisable. Yes, Gary and Match of the Day were still there in the Saturday night schedules, and Antiques Roadshow was reassuringly still part of Sunday evening. The Royal Standard would, in a seamless transfer of power, fly again over Buckingham Palace. But down the road at the Palace of Westminster, everything had stopped working, and Big Ben was its visual symbol. But this book is not about the fabric of Britain. If it was, I might have a few things to say. It's probably best not to get me started. But we've gone from being a nation that was the first to industrialise, to pioneer the railways, electricity, the telephone and so much more, to a country whose infrastructure is falling to bits. Just look at the high-speed rail line that looks like it's never going to be completed. The billions and billions spent with compulsory purchases of homes and land, the noble desire that economic regeneration of the northwest and northeast would be high-speed lines running from Manchester and Leeds, meeting in Birmingham and then going into London. When the Sunak government pulled the plug on the project, it looked as though it was going to go no further north than the West Midlands and wouldn't actually make it all the way into London, the most expensive white elephant ever. We've got more discussion about a bypass round or a tunnel under Stonehenge. I remember covering stories about that when I first went to work at BBC Radio Solent 40 years ago. Best not to rush these things, eh? Our shiny new multi-billion-pound aircraft carriers seem to break down every time they leave port and are unable to take part in military exercises, while the Army's latest drones apparently only work in good weather. Heathrow is still waiting for its Godot-like third runway. Hammersmith Bridge in London is closed 5 years after a temporary 2-week shutdown for repairs, which have never happened. And whatever you do, don't fall into the River Thames below, because the levels of E. coli in the water are dangerously high from the privatised water.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?